Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome once again to another live stream. Today, you'll recognize him, hopefully, from 10 o'clock today when we were bashing around trying to discuss the ins and outs or ups and downs of AI and whether it's going to take over the world. But today, we're talking about something, as usual, that I know nothing about, which is Article 4. Article 4. And apparently, it's the end of the world. Chris, what the hell is Article 4 and why is it going to have such an impact?
It's not quite the end of the world. An Article 4 direction. There are certain things that you, in the world of planning and working with houses, you can do without having to apply for planning permission. So
Right.
they're called permitted development rights. So
we've done whole conversations based around permitted development rights, yeah?
Yeah, they've got some great stuff that's coming in. An Article 4 direction, there's a few different elements that it can apply to, but it can be used in different remits to remove those permitted development rights. So it's the local authority taking them back. Yes.
Right.
One of the ways.
It sounds like a really unpleasant thing. They've said you can have a thing and then take you away.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, it's a bit rude, isn't it? So one of the things that they use in the local authorities use an Article 4 direction for is to remove the permitted development right of taking a house, a residential house, which is classed as C3 in the planning classification system, and moving it, shifting it into a small HMO, which is classed as 6 persons or under, which is C4 in the planning classification system. And there's a permitted development right to move from C3 to C4, and you don't have to apply for planning. Now, with the ongoing, I guess, commercialization, professionalization of the HMO industry, and it just appearing everywhere, there's a pushback. So there's a pushback from the local communities, and the local authorities, certain local authorities have said, no, we don't want these HMOs anymore. We want to remove these permitted development rights. And the way that they will wield this instrument is, quite bluntly, they will put a whole blanket over a vast area, maybe the entire local authority, and say, no HMOs in this area unless you go through planning process. Now, we know full well that the planning process is a long, arduous journey, which can take anywhere between 12 weeks and 2 years to get through,
Yes.
which then makes it commercially unviable for run-of-the-mill landlords to bring forward properties and adapt them from a small resi to a small HMO. Now, the problem that this creates is, well, let's go back a step. So the reason that the HMOs have come to existence in the first place is they're addressing a challenge. They are the free market addressing a challenge that's happening in the housing
challenge
market.
being there just aren't enough places for people to lay their heads.
That's exactly right. Yeah, there's not enough stock. So we had a chat earlier this morning with our guest speaker at the Bristol Lettings team, and he said again, and this is a conversation that's echoed with many other investor colleagues and agents that I speak to all through the country, that his intake for one property is up to 100 applicants. And that's crazy.
Nuts. That's craziness.
That shows you the level of demand.
He gave us a further stat, which was that perhaps only 9 of them will actually get a viewing.
Yes. So it's a staggering amount that, obviously there's only one property that they can all go for as well. So it's a staggering amount of demand that's pent up that's not being correctly addressed. Now, this will have a huge problem ongoing in terms of prices, because obviously supply and demand is a free market system, which is being constrained at the moment by the planning system. Now, naturally, the prices will keep going up because you've got more and more people fighting for these few amounts of the supply.
Absolutely.
Now,
there's no end to this until the supply either meets or strips the demand.
So my argument, my perspective on this is that local authorities generally, they're a bit slow. They're a bit behind the times, and then when they do react, it's often a knee-jerk reaction. So they're using the Article 4 directions, and they're actually further constraining the supply of property in the local region. Now, I can understand that there's some element of NIMBYism there, that people don't want it in their backyard or they don't like change. But the reality is, we're in a constantly changing world. Um, the fact of the matter is that people need somewhere to live. There absolutely has to be an alleviation on the choking of the supply. And at the moment, that making things worse by saying no, we can't have these types of accommodations in certain areas. It doesn't make any sense to me, because you have, for example, me taking one residential property, more small residential property, out of the supply chain that a single family could have, but then I'm creating rooms for between 4 and 6 people. So how am I not helping alleviate demand?
I think it's perception. I think the problem is perception. There was a time when, before, as you mentioned, the HMO industry was being professionalized, when every Tom, Dick, and Harriet were creating HMOs to perhaps substandards and then not looking after them. And this has created a view, wrongly or rightly, wrongly, I think, that HMOs are bad things.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, you've got a lack of housing stock, and the only available way of availing yourself of more places where people can lay their weary heads is to create effectively some out of a few, if you see what I mean. Yeah, and which is
at the moment there seems to be no end in sight of the deregulation of the planning system, which, as we know, is really the only solution to cutting all the red tape and allowing the developments to prosper, and actually almost reinvigorating the planning system and realigning their thinking to, rather than being negatively geared and find reasons to not do something, to work with developers and actually open up sections of land and sections of developments that will actually alleviate the challenges in the local areas. Now, there are plenty of sites, both greenfield and brownfield sites, that can be redeveloped. That there are a huge amount of challenges with them, but again, that's where the local authorities should be working with potential prospective developers, but not in the meantime just saying no to any other type of development unless you go through our planning system, which we know is inherently problematic.
We were talking about these sort of things only the other day. The fact that above shops there are often empty spaces that are perfectly workable with all the correct settings up as far as waste and everything else is concerned. It's not like an office building where that was never designed to have occupants living there. These are places that were patently designed for humans to live in. It wouldn't take a lot of effort to be able to turn them into very, very successful HMOs. But once again, as you say, being blocked at this stage just seems to be counterproductive.
It's the knee-jerk reaction that really gets me. That it could be a very finely used tool to say, well, actually, there's a specific problem in this, and this street. Now, the council will always fall back on. Also, they'll always find a reason to kind of justify their opinion, but it works out about face in that they'll have the opinion and then they'll try and justify it later.
Well, yes.
So yeah, it's the vested interest that they're. It's almost like myopic thinking. It's like, we're going to do this and forget it. What impact it has on the wider community. Now, the challenge that you had from our guest who came on earlier, he said that Bristol's now the second most expensive city, unaffordable city to live in outside of London because of the housing crisis there. Well, this is going to be an ongoing issue as we keep doing these as local authorities keep implementing these different challenges in different areas. So as it's starting to spin out, and I see other local authorities starting to follow suit, and again implementing the same knee-jerk reactions where they have a huge development of houses coming into an area, HMOs starting to become more prolific in an area, and either the local residents kick back and start lobbying their councillors, and all the councillors just kick off and say, no, this is too much. We don't know how to handle this. And because they don't know how to handle it, they just say no outright. which
So
doesn't benefit really.
is there any way you could give assurances and demonstrate?
I'm not sure what assurances Gareth wanted me to give. But yeah, in terms of the benefits for, there are benefits there for the local community. Yes, it does mean that there's going to be some changes, but like I was saying, that there are changes in every set of the community in every different part of the country. There's a constant change where communities are in a state of flux, so it's pretty important to bring in, I guess, the key word guess that they like to use is stakeholders, and
Right.
get the opinion of a number of different aspects of the community, um, even way before they just say no or make the decision to say no. So I guess there's some sort of reframing of their thinking that needs to happen. That actually we need to be looking at a more macro level and to see how we can really adapt what we have as an interim step to also then release more supply further down the line.
I'm interested in hearing what are the reasoning that you're given why HMOs are not applicable in certain areas.
The after the fact reasons after the decision's been made, often things like, although I haven't heard this one for a while, but parking, that's a good one. Because I appreciate some of the residents, they may have cars, and if you're putting 6 people into a house that was originally for a family of 3 that may now have had 2 cars, then that's an increase in obviously an increase in the numbers. However, it's not really realistic that they will all have vehicles, so many of them may not. The other one is access to local services. Is there enough local services? Well, again, yeah, okay, that should definitely be taken into account, and enough provision be made of those local services. But we keep seeing local services being shut down, irrespective of whether or not HMOs exist in that area. So that doesn't really seem to wash that much. Yeah, there are other factors as well, but so I think he's gone again. So what other factors come into play? I think a lot of the other element is pushback. So pushback from the local residents. So, and it's how that is then interpreted by the councillors and how much of, I guess, a flea in their ear that they just need to, that they take that knee-jerk reaction in the first place and then scrabble around after the fact to try and find reasons.
What can be done? I'm looking for a silver lining here.
I
As
think
ever.
I think they need that middle ground. I think they need to reframe their thinking. Perhaps there's some element that, because there's a few vested interests as well in the local authorities. So you have different departments dealing with different elements that merge together to bring the HMO compliance into one thing. So it's not like there's one department you have to deal with. There's the 2 primary ones are the environmental health, who will issue the HMO license, and they have a set of standards that you need to adhere to. And then there's also planning, and they have almost a different set of standards depending on what you're trying to do with that particular property. So there needs to be some joined up thinking internally in terms of actually this is a stopgap. How can we make this work? And then how can we then collaborate with private investors to make sure this is well implemented while we're sorting out the rest of the rubbish that we need to deliver on further down the line.
Just before we sign off, summarize the position. I mean, just give an overview.
I think there's some complexities to do with Article 4 at the moment, and the challenge, it doesn't mean that you can't build HMOs in Article 4 areas. It just means you have to take it through a planning process. So if you have a team around you, they can make that easier. If you don't, by all means, connect with me. I can help you with that. I wouldn't rule out building in HMOs in Article 4 areas. It's just important to be aware that there is some pushback from the local community and the local authority there, and it's important to understand why that's in place. Now, they may have put the Article 4 in just to almost as lip service to the local residents, and they
Right.
may have eased the planning process to actually get properties through. So don't be discouraged by it. It's just something, another element that you need to be aware of and get your head around what it is and why it exists.
Your way does seem to be strewn with speed bumps at the moment. I do hope we manage to smooth this out. Once again, I have to thank Chris for educating me on something I had no idea about. They can give with one hand and take away with the other. It doesn't seem either rational nor fair, but okay. And the continuous education I'm getting, I'm hoping is helping you guys out there. But until we meet again, I wish all of you a successful conclusion to the week, and of course, great mental health. Bye bye now.